Tim Staples,
Hey, what's up, brother?
how you doing, man?
Real good. Aubrey, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. So I want to give people a little bit of credibility here for you first,
Right.
because I've known some of your story, and like the front page of YouTube is a big deal. Not easy to get on that thing because a lot of people see that shit. How many viewers does YouTube have on the front page? I mean, a lot of people typing in just YouTube going to that shit.
There are literally millions of videos uploaded every day,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's 5 billion hours that people search.
Damn, that's a lot. And a lot of people are going to that homepage. So if you can get something highlighted on the homepage,
Yeah.
that's a coup.
We've calculated the odds of getting to the front page on any given day is 1 in 2 million.
1 in 2 million.
Yeah.
You're bucking the odds, my friend. How many times have you gotten a video on the front page of YouTube?
We've done it 35 times.
So obviously that means that there's some knowledge that you have that can be very valuable in helping people spread a message. And it's something that we were talking about. You know, a lot of people think about, all right, front page of YouTube, or that's not going to be reachable for most of us. But the same information, the same reason that got you on the front page is the same thing that can take someone from, 5 views to 100 views, 100 views to 1,000 views, 1,000 views to 10,000 views, 10,000 views to 1,000,000 views. It's all similar principles, right?
Man, that is spot on. It's everybody always thinks about it as binary. It's like, oh, I'm either doing none or I'm doing millions of views. It's like, what if we could help you by 10x, right? And we always think in terms of these principles, not in terms of hacks or cheats, because those things change and change so rapidly. But what are the fundamental truths that can help you break through all this noise that's out in the world? And that's how we think about it.
Yeah. So what are these fundamental truths? I
Yeah.
mean, this is the book, Break Through the Noise, the 9 Rules to Capture Global Attention, right?
Yeah, so here's how I kind of frame the world, which is, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, all the megaphones of society, all the things that would get you out on a wide basis, were all owned by corporations, right? So it'd be television networks, it'd be movie studios, maybe radio.
So you better be sharing a sifter with Rupert Murdoch if you want to be fucking getting out there,
That's
right?
exactly right. If you wanted to be famous, what was your road, right? You
Yeah.
had to go through these casting calls, and I mean, it was a 1 in a million, right? Literally. And there was no way around it. Very difficult. Or if you were a brand that wanted to get your message out, how were you going to do that? Had to make a commercial, spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. There just weren't any other options. So then the internet comes along, changes everything,
Yep.
right? And you basically put a movie studio in your pocket where you can broadcast to the world, right? So now we have this YouTube phenomenon where you're getting YouTube famous in your mom's basement and you're making millions of dollars in Omaha, right? So the good news in 2019 is that everyone has a megaphone. The bad news in 2019 is that everyone has a megaphone and they're shouting into it constantly, so much so that everybody tunes out nearly all of it.
You have to.
You have to, right? I mean, you can only take in so much from an attention perspective, right? And so my message is always about how do you break through that noise and get your message heard?
Yeah. Well, how do you?
So the initial concept that the book is based around is about being shareable. And what does being shareable mean? It literally means being worthy of a share, right? So it's about creating content that's so valuable for the audience that you want to reach that they're compelled to share it. And it's a very simple concept, but it's actually a very, very powerful one.
Yeah. And you make a distinction between shareable and viral,
Yes.
right? Like those are two different things. And I think that's kind of an important distinction because people still have that term viral in
Yes.
their mental zeitgeist of like, oh, we want a viral video. But really you're just talking about, no, let's just make this shareable.
My life is I get 12 of those calls a day.
Right.
Make something viral. That's my life.
I want a viral video,
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah.
Make it happen for me.
So there was
I want this contagious as fuck.
There was an early day of the internet where like virality was actually very repeatable if you knew exactly what you were doing, right? There wasn't a lot of competition. There wasn't a lot of noise yet. And we had a whole system. Like we were batting at one point, we were batting 50% on 1 million organic views not from influencer accounts, but from like brand accounts that had like 3,000 followers.
Wow.
But it just got more crowded and the algorithms have changed, right? So things have completely evolved, right? So we've had to evolve with it. And I think, really what this is all about, the first step is like, think about value for your audience. My simplest advice in this space is like, think about who you want to reach. Think about what they would want to watch, not what you want to give, but what they would want to watch, and then figure out how to give it to them in your unique voice, right? So one of the first rules, focus on value. Think about the world in terms of value. Number 2, find your voice. What do you have to give to the world around that value proposition that nobody else is doing? And if you can find those 2 things, just those 2 simple concepts, you'll be head and shoulders above anybody else around you.
And that's all of our unique superpower, right? Is like our own unique radical perspective. There's nobody that has our same voice and our same perspective, no matter what you're talking about is. I mean, you can have a million people talking about the same thing, but your perspective on that thing is going to be unique and different if you trust your own voice and your own perspective has value. But if you're trying to parrot somebody else's perspective and be like somebody that you see, you're going to have no value.
You're lost in the noise.
Yeah, you're lost in the noise.
And I think the key there is like, how do you find that voice, but find it around an area of value? Because you can find some really unique voices that nobody cares about. And like the old model is always like, and especially in the brand world, it's like, I'm great. I have a great brand. I'm going to project that out to the world, right? That's what advertising is, right? Boom, boom. It's a one-way conversation. But today, when we talk to brands, we say, okay, let's think about your customer. Let's think about how they see the world. Let's think about what they would want from you. Let's give them that, tap into that emotional connection, and now have a relationship with them where we can actually talk about the dollars later.
Yeah.
You start with the dollars, you're not going to have a relationship. You start with the relationship, you'll get to the dollars.
Yeah. I mean, the algorithms right now are savage with that.
Savage.
Because like the moment you come out selling something, like you're not even going to get any impressions, any engagement, any interaction. You're dead. You're dead. And it's like, even if it's and then so you adjust. And like even recently, I posted a pretty cool picture of me with the kettlebell, and it was talking about we had Amazon Prime Day, and I was just like letting people know we got some sales for Amazon Prime Day.
Yeah.
Didn't fucking matter. That fucking image got buried. It's not like I put like sale on there.
Yeah.
It was just me with the fucking kettlebell. And then the comment, but people are like, nah, fuck you. You know what I mean? So it's like really, really delicate now.
Super delicate.
And you got to really be, the landscape has changed.
One of the superpowers I've noticed from the audience is different even like now than like a couple years ago. They can spot a fucking ad so quickly, man.
Yeah.
And you try to like wrap it together. And like the early days, it was easy because you'd have these big brands and they use a certain type of camera and a certain type of lighting and it would be polished. Whereas all the YouTube and Instagram and all these guys that were coming up that were like superstars, they were talking straight in their iPhone.
Right.
So you could spot a brand like super easy, right? Now people are getting smarter about it and they're trying to be more authentic about it. But that is a superpower, man. That first 3 seconds, you might get 3 seconds. And if you're lucky enough to get 3 seconds, you better hook them in. And I always talk about people going through their social feeds like a serial dater on Tinder. Like they're swiping and swiping and swiping. And it's amazing what catches their interest. But if you watch somebody, they go swipe, stop, swipe, stop, swipe, click play, 3 seconds, swipe, stop. Okay, I connected with something. I'm going to watch it. Might lead me down to a rabbit hole of 50 other things I watched that day.
Yeah.
Right. But how did I get to that rabbit hole? And if I don't grab that attention on the front end, I'm never going to get there. So we talk a lot about concepts like curb appeal, which is all about, if you think about a house and how you would sell a house, right? Curb appeal is when you're driving by on the street. So your video, how you see it and how it lives in the world, does it have a cool front yard? Is it well painted? Does it fit the neighborhood? Can I see a pool in the backyard? Oh, I see that. Now I'm going to go in and actually check it out.
Yeah.
But if I don't like the curb appeal, then I'm never going to get inside and see how great it is, right? So that's one of the concepts. And then the second one, which is...
John, does that mean like choosing the right cover? And is that part of the curb appeal?
Yeah. So the curb appeal it's a very visual and copy-based element, right? So it's the image that they see first in connection with the copy that they see around it. And a lot of people try to get really cute with the image or the copy, and it comes off as confusing, or it's not you need to be able to understand it immediately, right? So if I have an image that goes, wow, and it hits kind of an emotion for me, and then the copy backs that up in a very simple way, now you've got my attention. If I see an image that looks cool, but then the copy goes a completely different direction, and now I'm confused, I don't want to take the time to figure out that confusion. I'm gone. I'm swiping.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of times the things that work best are visually appealing combined with simple and compelling, right? And that has a really strong curb appeal. Right. And that's also why, celebrity images can be very effective. Images of people with reactions. Reactions are typically internet gold. So you have to really think and test how you have your curb appeal. And that's something you can learn and evolve and get better at, even if you don't have millions of dollars, right? You can just try these different formats and see what people are responding to and what the engagement rate looks like.
Really, it's interesting to talk about emotions having really interesting curb appeal, right? Because what we're talking about is the hook for the first 3 seconds of your content.
Yes.
And people are inherently drawn to other people's emotions. I mean, it is the core basis of all reality television, right? Is like facilitating situations that are going to create actual genuine emotions and drama and these things that we can't help as human, tribal, social creatures, but go, what's happening? You know what I mean? So like, it is interesting to think about that and think about that being early. And obviously you don't want to be manufacturing this in some inauthentic way, but like if there's an emotional part of your piece that you can connect to, maybe that's what you lead with.
1,000%. It's funny you say that too, because reality TV was almost the original internet, right? They were experimenting with concepts that going on to work really well online and on social. But there's a second concept that we talk about. It's called giving up the goat.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the idea is like we're known, one of the videos we're known for is with John Cena and basically, and with a brand called Cricket Wireless. And so we took a bunch of John Cena super fans, right? And we brought them together and they thought they were auditioning for a chance to be like his ambassador online or something like that, right? So they're all like there going, hey, John Cena's awesome, and telling us about John Cena. And what they didn't know was that John Cena was behind a wall and about to break through the wall and literally surprise them and kind of give them the surprise of their life, right? And so when we cut this video together, in a Hollywood perspective, you would go, okay, let's tell this story. The story is there are John Cena super fans. They talk about John Cena. John Cena's in the back. And then this big climax moment, John busts through the wall, right? And then they have this interaction surprise that happens in Act 3. Well, then why do we show it first?
Yeah, because you don't have the captive audience that's going to sit down to fucking Act 3. You got to hit them hard in Act 1.
You got to give up the goat.
You got to give up the goat.
So literally our video, the first 3 seconds, you see John Cena come through a wall. You go, holy shit, what's happening? There's an emotion there of surprise and awe. And then now we can tell the story because we got you hooked. And so that's the concept.
All right, you said there's an emotion there of surprise and awe. And I know you have 5 emotions that are like key to making something that is shareable.
So I think the whole world now is all about emotion. If you want to like be relevant in the world today, I think 20 years ago, if you could be Brad Pitt or Leo DiCaprio and you could get kind of plucked out and put through the Hollywood machine and you could be this big movie star. But I don't think today that those same things matter. And so we've looked at all these emotions that people connect to and what ultimately makes someone share a piece of content, right? Because sharing is a super personal experience. Like how much do you share on your personal social media?
I don't know. I just shared my end of my relationship with my girlfriend on social media today. So I share pretty much fucking everything.
Well, you share about you. But so if I'm a brand, what are the odds that you're going to share me?
Oh, yeah.
0, right?
Yep.
If I'm an individual that you don't know, what are the odds you're going to share me? 0, right? And so everyone's like that, no matter where they are, right? So we've found that the way to get people to invest in content and actually share it, it's all emotion led. And we've identified these emotions, and there's literally dozens of them that people can lean into.
So basically you're saying people have to be feeling something in order to actually share something.
1,000%.
So you're tapping into their emotional
1,000%.
emotional body in order to get them to create the action that you're really looking for.
They'll watch something without emotion. They won't engage or share without emotion. And so we've identified these 5 shareable emotions, and there's a bunch of other emotions that can be really effective, but we found these to be kind of consistent in the big hits that we've had that are also unifying emotions, right? There's a lot of emotions that can be negative, like anger or fear, right? Or distrust. There's a lot of things
which can work, but those are like the black magic versions.
They're black magic, man, and they're super polarizing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's an upside and a downside, and we can talk about that. But so the ones that we found to be the most powerful, we call the 5 shareable emotions: happiness, awe, empathy, curiosity, and surprise.
Happiness, awe, empathy, curiosity, and surprise.
Yeah. So walking through those, first one is happiness or joy, right? And so the backdrop for this is there's a lot of negativity online. You see it every day, right? And so it can be incredibly powerful to just give somebody a smile in their day. right? Just a little act, just a little smile. If you're going through social media and you're in a bad mood and you watch something or someone shared something with you and it makes you smile and it resets your day, that's an incredibly powerful concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had a lot of success using kind of unexpected joy. A lot of the work we've done with Cricket Wireless is all about putting a smile on your face. The whole campaign is called Something to Smile About. That's it. It's not about phones. It's not about a price or purchase. It's make people smile, lean in, make them part of your tribe. And now we can talk about business later, right? So that's the first one. The second one is called awe. It's an emotion of respect. Whoa, right? Seeing something you haven't seen before or something that really grabs your attention. And so in the early days of the internet, this was a lot of like who could out extreme the other person, right? The people, Red Bull jumping out of the stratosphere, or Devin Supertramp swinging from a rock, all these prank guys doing these elaborate pranks. The problem with that is at some point you can't out extreme, right? You start to lose that kind of appeal. So a lot of the content we see doing really well in awe is all Good Samaritan content. It's like, how can I do something amazing for one of my fellow humans that is unexpected that makes people feel good?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of the new awe.
Or sometimes something like the bottle cap challenge will work.
Amazing. Yeah,
right.
That's
like,
right.
That's like simple enough and also not only shareable, but also repeatable by multiple people. You're creating a whole movement. I don't even know who fucking started that, but they crushed it. Whoever did that.
And I feel like every month or two, there's one of those.
Yeah.
Really difficult to create.
Right.
But really powerful if you can.
Yeah.
And so the third one is empathy. And empathy is all about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? This is an emotion for you. And it can be super powerful and about bringing people together. And the counterpoint to empathy is pride. So pride is about celebrating the shoes I'm in, right? And those two can go hand in hand, right? I don't know if you've seen the Heineken spot. We didn't do it, but where they brought distinct people together to go build a bar together.
No, I haven't seen that.
So basically, they took people. They would show you in the video like this one. This person thinks homosexuality is wrong via the Bible, and this person is gay, right? And if they would have met, and just talked about their differences, there would have been a big problem. But they said, hey, here's Lindsay, here's Steve. And you guys are going to build this bar together. So they spend the whole day together building a bar, say like 12 hours. Difficult, they have to do all this stuff, and they build it. And finally, at the end of the day, they're done with the bar, and they're so proud of themselves, right? And then they come on and say, hey, we want to show you something. And they showed the videos from before of like Steve talking about how, he's a homophobe, and Lindsay talking about how she, all about gay rights. And then they turn it back to them and they say, okay, now you have a choice. You guys can let your differences separate you and you can go your separate ways and never talk again, or you can have a beer and talk about it. And the video is really powerful. Everybody sat down and had a beer and a conversation, but it was only because they'd had that emotional connection during the day.
Yeah.
Right? And so I always thought that was really clever.
That is really clever. I mean, once you see the human in someone else, all of the ways
Everything
that
changes.
You just kind of place someone in this avatar ideal of what they represent to you. Oh, liberal, conservative, activist of this. It becomes no longer a human. It just becomes a figure.
1,000%.
And then, but if you can connect back to the humanness of that person, then you realize like, oh, we got a lot more in common than we don't have in common.
I think the superheroes of the next 20 years are going to be people that can do that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can divide. Let's talk about people that can bring people together, right? Because it's a very difficult thing to do, especially as we get more and more divided.
Yeah.
So the fourth emotion, which is a very powerful emotion, is curiosity. And curiosity is all about presenting information and knowledge in a way that's never been presented before, right? So it's all about new information about the world, usually presented in a way that people have never seen, right? And so you do this, right? You're talking about some pretty deep topics that no one's ever talked about before, or at least in a new way that they've talked about it, right? And it's presented in a way that they've never seen, right? And that's really powerful. And you also see this like in the science space, and like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Vsauce or like Smarter Every Day or some of these YouTube channels. And they're all about teaching you about the world, these super, distinct scientific concepts, but doing it in a way that's super fun and interesting and and you feel smarter. You share it because you feel smarter. Or you feel it'd be helpful to your friend, or you just think it's interesting, right? And then the last emotion is surprise. And it's actually one of the most powerful emotions. And it's all about going one direction and then going the completely opposite way, right? Giving that moment of surprise. And we've actually found that when you can do surprise and partner it with happiness and awe, if you can put those three things together, like those are some of the biggest hits we've ever had.
It's almost like a multiplier.
It's a multiplier. And when I look at people that are doing well in the internet age, and we look at these emotions, it's pretty interesting as you start to line them up and really understand them, that the people that are really connecting today typically hit those emotions in a really strong way. One emotion, if you hit one strong, you can break through if you're really strong. But the people that have longevity typically are hitting 2, sometimes even 3 or more of those emotions in a really strong way.
Yeah, I mean, I think about these videos that people share over and over again, and these kind of interesting ones. Like one comes to mind that had that surprise effect in it. You know, so it shows this military guy, and there's this kid who's blindfolded, and he's like trying to attack him and throw punches and whatever. And then eventually the kid takes off his blindfold and realizes it's his dad who's home from the service, right? So there's like surprise, there's empathy.
I get the feels that you're talking about.
You know, there's so many different elements in there, and then the kid's crying and they're hugging, and like that thing just goes bonkers.
So what happened there, right? So what emotions happened there, right? So surprise is the most obvious one, right? Yeah. A huge surprise, but there's empathy. You're putting yourself as a father or a son, right? There is awe,
happiness,
and awe. You're hitting 3 to 4 emotions there, super strong. Super strong, right? And like, so I said, I always like to look at people that are out there killing it. Like, let's take a look at you for a second, right? Like, how do you think you engage with those emotions from a personal level? Like, as you're talking to your audience and bringing these things into the world.
Well, I just open up the windows and the blinds to those moments that happen in my own life. You know what I mean? And that's really what I do. Is it's my complete vulnerability and openness to what's actually happening that creates that, which is somewhat surprising inherently anyways. I think like the surprise factor of somebody being like, oh no, hey, this is what's happening. This is how I really fucked up. This is when I was crushed emotionally. This is when I was that. So there's that surprise element. And then there's the empathy of the humanness of what I'm sharing. And then whatever other emotion that might be there. Sometimes it's happiness, sometimes it's sadness. And then there's also the curious. So there's a lot of other things, but I think the big part of it is just some of it always contains the surprise that I'm actually even talking about in the first place.
There's no doubt.
You know, and I think that's kind of where it goes. But I never really thought about it in terms of these emotions. But now knowing about the emotions, I see, and then starting to see like, okay, what are the videos that have really done super well, you know, randomly, like, and like, what have those ones been, you know? And I think some have been very emotionally driven, and some have been very, you know, other ones. Like I remember I did a video with Donald Cerrone, who's a UFC fighter. And like I throw an axe, and those are always pretty popular videos. People are curious about axe throwing. Less so now because they got axe throwing leagues and whatever. But I was doing it like 4 years ago or whatever. So I throw one axe, hit the target, and then it pans immediately over to Cowboy, who's smoking a cigar and throwing a double-handed like battle axe. And then the battle axe comes in and hit. The video's like 10 seconds long. And that fucking thing went bonkers, you know, like
in 10 seconds you hit awe and surprise. And so it's really awesome to hear you talk about yourself, and it resonates with me. And then from a distance, I go, you're crushing empathy and you're crushing curiosity, right? Curiosity meaning you're taking topics that are age-old topics, but you're presenting new information in a new style, right? Which is clearly resonating with people. The empathy thing I think is obvious. And then I think the people that are doing this the best also have an element of surprise to their backstory, right? And I think your surprise is like, you know, you're a good-looking guy that looks a certain way that you wouldn't expect to be talking about these kind of more touchy-feely topics, right? But you're really well-spoken about them, and you go super deep, right? And I think that like that little bit, like is a big bit, right? And then it opens the door for people to go, oh, this guy's interesting. What's he talking about? And then you know your shit, and you go deep, and you put yourself in other people's shoes, right? And then you're dropping knowledge, but it doesn't feel like I'm being taught.
Right.
I'm along for the journey. And so one of the things, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm trying to think of the people that have been on your show to see if there's like parallels between the same type of emotions. But like the guys I know, like we both know Jay Shetty, right? Let's take him. Gary Vaynerchuk was just on your show.
Yep.
I've just gotten to know Joe DeSena. Has he been on your podcast?
No, but I know him. I've been on his show.
Yeah. Okay. Or Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
But as you think about those, okay, so let's take those 4 guys. Let's take you, Aubrey Marcus. Let's take Jay Shetty, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Joe DeSena. And if you looked at that crew, how alike are those 4 people? Just in general, on paper.
Not much.
Not much, right? Well, they're 4 very distinct guys, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, we talked about you. Jay's a former monk, right? Turned kind of Facebook superstar that puts wisdom out on the internet. Gary's all about business and entrepreneurship, obviously, and has his very distinct style. And then Joe, created Spartan and the Death Race, right? And is a very hardcore guy, but has a big heart, right? But if you look at different ages, different topics, different styles for sure, right? The styles couldn't be more different, right? But I would bet you if we start to peel back the onion, there'd be, okay, let's talk about Jay Shetty, right? Jay's message really resonates because he was a monk and he has this wisdom that he can share with people, right? What's it about? It's about empathy. He's going into people's shoes and seeing what they're dealing with and helping them out. It's about curiosity, right? Because he's laying information in a new way where you don't know you're being taught, and it's super interesting. There's a little bit of surprise, maybe a little bit of awe, but he's hitting those 2 emotions really hard, right? Gary Vaynerchuk, right? He's an entrepreneur. You're going along with the journey with Gary, right? That's part of his appeal. But he puts himself in your shoes. You could be doing this too. He's all about the entrepreneur and the guy coming up. And he's all about dropping knowledge, right? And he does it in a way super interesting because I've been really studying his content. I don't think people realize it, but he always does the fly on the wall content. You know why he does that?
It's effective.
It's super effective. And the reason I think it's effective is because you feel like you're in the room with him.
Yeah. Feels like you could be just there watching.
You're there watching. You're part of his journey.
And he's not doing it to you as for content. It's almost voyeuristic.
It's almost voyeuristic.
Yeah.
And that, like, I'm in for the ride part is the gold.
Yeah.
Because if he ever goes to the point where he's like, okay, I'm on the mountaintop and now I'm just going to preach down to you, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. As soon as you see somebody as different than you,
that's 100%.
Then you're not going to really identify with them in that way.
100%. And then Joe, his story's super shareable, right? Created the Death Race and all this Spartan stuff and this whole movement. And he's all about getting to that kind of breaking point in these extreme, circumstances to bring out, I guess, character, right? It's about your soul in some regards. But it's same thing, right? He has empathy. He's doing it for all the right reasons. He's trying to get people to develop personally. And then he's basically dropping knowledge on you in a way that you would never expect, right? You're learning about yourself because he's putting you through these trenches, right? He doesn't think of himself as a storyteller, but he's finding these deep truths and he's telling that to the world. And so I would argue, like, you're all the same guy in some regard, right? You're all about personal development, personal empowerment, kind of body, mind, spirit, right? Jay's about personal development, your relationship with the world. Gary's about personal development, your business and your entrepreneurial spirit in the digital world. And Joe DeSena is all about personal development and character and your soul, right? And then what's your life purpose? But it's really a lot of the same emotions that are in play.
So when you're telling these stories, let's say, because we all have the ability to tell these interesting stories. And there's so many choices for the platforms that we can use. And like probably best practices and rules for each platform. So if you wouldn't mind, let's go through some of the platforms that we can disseminate this content and these messages and talk about, like, all right, what are the best practices for these things?
Yeah. So I'll start with an unexpected place, which is LinkedIn. And so everybody thinks of LinkedIn as kind of the B team of the social squad, right? Because it's, it's business and it's more serious and everybody kind of discards it. All these platforms go through these periods where they want to encourage creators to make video content, and they open the algorithms up in a big way, right? So you saw it first on YouTube. You created all these YouTube superstars. Really hard to become a YouTube superstar in 2019, right? Then Facebook just opened up the algorithm. It was, for 2-3 years, it's been crazy. It's starting to go the other way now, right? Then it went to Instagram. Everybody's Instagram famous now, and all the stories and the video content has really taken off. And it's still in its heyday, but it will come to a conclusion. But LinkedIn, underexploited, Nobody's been creating good quality video content for LinkedIn. So the algorithms are wide open.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking to grow your brand and your business, there are opportunities on LinkedIn that don't exist on any of the other platforms. One of the reasons you see guys like Gary spending so much time on their LinkedIn and talking about that. But it works. You can get organic reach that you can't get on the other platforms. So I would strongly suggest you take a look at LinkedIn to see if you can be valuable a voice on LinkedIn, because there's opportunities there that don't exist other places.
Okay.
And but then on each of these platforms, we always think about what is the value proposition of the platform. Like, so let's stop thinking about us and let's talk about why these platforms exist. So YouTube, everybody thinks about kind of being YouTube famous, but when you think of it big picture, it's actually, I call it the library of the internet. Most people use YouTube to search, right? So if you're like, oh, I need to go build a garden gnome for my yard, I type it into YouTube and I get 50 different results, and I pick one based on the curb appeal, right? And then I'm building a garden gnome for my yard. And that's 80, 90% of YouTube, right? Is like using it as a Google of video.
Sure.
Right? So any video you create for YouTube, you have to be thinking about the long tail. You have to be really thinking about the curb appeal. What's the visual? What's the copy around it? What are all the tags? So that as you develop that content over time, it keeps popping up in the search and people are finding it. And so you think about YouTube, ironically, not as this quick viral place, but as this place to build value over the long term and via search. Facebook is much more, I call it the city square. People are bustling and arguing and sharing ideas, and things are kind of happening in real time. Have you ever tried to search something on Facebook? It doesn't exist, right? You can't find old videos. It doesn't work that way. It's not built the same brain. So you want to share things that are of the moment, that are going to be super emotional, right? All these shareable emotions really play on Facebook. And you want to think about, hey, how can I provide value that other people aren't? And how can I add my voice to this conversation in a unique way, right? And there's a lot of like riding the wave of things that are happening or flipping the script against what pop culture is doing and things like that on Facebook. Instagram, I always think about as the art gallery of the internet. It's where people put forward their best self, right? Like, so they're like, oh, what is the best version of me and how do I project it to the world? You know, with filters or with the right lighting, or I took 57 pictures and I posted the one, right? That's Instagram, right? And honestly, you know, a side view of that, which goes directly into your space, is Instagram especially is creating so much anxiety amongst teenagers today, right? Because everybody's being compared to other people's best selves and their best moments. It's creating all this confusion and anxiety and depression. And I think it's going to be a big, big problem in the next 20 years as these kids come to realize that, you know, maybe that, you know, that life isn't attainable, or there's no happiness in chasing those things. But well,
maybe that means that there's an onus on content creators to share the not so shiny, not so beautiful, not so perfect elements on these platforms, so that people can look at them and go like, oh shit, yeah, there's this person getting fucking wrecked.
Yes.
And sharing that honestly, you know, because I feel wrecked sometimes too.
Well, I feel like we're having that moment now where when people do that, when they have that honest moment, I don't know if you saw, like Mindy Kaling shared a photo of herself in a bathing suit like a week or two ago. And she was just like, this is me, right? And it got so much love.
Yeah.
Right? Because it didn't have a filter and it wasn't the best angle, and she hadn't just come off the treadmill, and she was just her. And I feel like that moment is coming. That's kind of that unifying moment. What you're talking about is the unifying moment. And that's why I say the rock stars of the next 20 years are going to be those people, as opposed to the one that can give you the best filter with the best sunset.
Yeah. So let's say you have a really compelling piece of content.
Yeah.
Harnesses some of these core 5 emotions that you're looking for.
Yeah.
What is your dissemination plan?
Yeah.
Let's say so the full piece is 4 to 5 minutes, you know, but you can make cuts down to smaller segments or whatever. Like, you have this compelling piece of content. Let's call it 4 minutes.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? How do you get it out on all your platforms?
Yeah.
What is the ways that you kind of tweak it to make it suitable?
Well, I'll start with this. I think one of the challenges or mistakes today is that people feel like they have to be everywhere, right? They're like, hey, I've got 5 social platforms, so I've got to go be on all of them. And what happens is, instead of crushing one platform and seeing big growth, they're mediocre at 5.
Yeah. And
it's really hard to make content that really shines on YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, it's nearly impossible unless you find a really distinct voice that can kind of be cut in those. Gary Vee's done a pretty good job of it. Some others have done a good job of it. So my first advice would be crush one platform, especially when you're coming up, because you don't have the resources to go out and be like, hey, I got 15 different cuts. And then on that platform, let's say you choose Facebook. You have a 4-minute video and you choose Facebook. What we're all about is the first ignition period behind that content. And what I mean by that is there's a huge test and learn process that always goes into these videos. So even if we spend millions of dollars on a production or you shoot it on your iPhone, same process, right? Which is, hey, how do I cut some different versions of this? I think I have the most impactful 3 seconds to go grab people's attention. I think I have the best thumbnail with the best copy, but go test it.
How do you test it?
So basically on Facebook, you can do what's called dark posts, right? So basically it's a served ad out from you to the world, but it doesn't appear on your feed, right? But if real people are seeing it and they have an opportunity to engage with it, just like anything else you can see on social, right? So let's say, for us, we'll cut 50 different versions of a big video that's going to go out and test all of it. For someone else, it might be 3 or 4 versions, right? But cut it differently, have a different start to the video, have a different thumbnail, and then spend a little bit. You can spend a little bit of money. You can spend $25, right? And you can put it out to 1,000 people and then see how that comes back, right? And look at what we call the engagement rate. Engagement rate is really simple. We look at some really complicated metrics, but the simplest way to think about it is how many people watched the video and what percentage of those people engaged with it, like, comment, or share, right?
Yep.
So viewership is great. You can buy that. You can't.
So is Facebook the best testing platform?
Facebook right now is the best testing platform
because of these dark posts.
Because of the dark posts. Now Facebook owns Instagram, so there's some equity that transfers over there.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to test on Facebook. That's why, as one of your core elements, I think Facebook is a key piece because of this testing. Number one, it's very share intensive. Like, it's built around the share.
Yeah.
And number two, because you can test so cost effectively. You don't need big budgets to go do this. You just need to be able to put the time and the effort and know how to use the knobs and levers. But they're not that difficult to learn. Like anyone can learn it. And then what will happen is you'll put out these 4 different pieces of content, and the one you thought was awesome because it was you and you loved it, will be the worst of the 4 in terms of, you know what I mean? And,
of course.
Yeah. And this other one that was an afterthought gets 5x the engagement, and the view through rate on the first 30 seconds is 3 times as high. And you're like, okay. And then the big message there for me is like, where you can't be emotional is you can't be emotionally connected to the cuts.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to be willing to kill your darlings.
You got to kill your darlings.
Yeah.
And that's where the science has to come in, right? Like, I actually now flipped it. At first, it would really bother me if I really liked something. Now I love the fact that the data tells us what's right, because we know that's what's going to be successful. Now you have to compare that with instinct, right? It can't all be just machine learning, right? It'll lead you to devoid of emotion, right? But I think if you can find the right emotional setup and then test it, you'll find that real feedback, and that will drive every decision you make.
When you keep referring to us, and I'm imagining that you're talking about an agency that you're running that does this type of thing.
Yeah, so I've got a company called Shareability, and it's a Silicon Beach company. I think about it as kind of Hollywood meets Silicon Valley. So it's all about the front end of like, how do you tell stories on the internet? That's the emotional connection. And then the Silicon Valley piece is, how do we drive engagement and scale around that message? And that's where the science comes in, right? Like, how do you do this testing? How do you put paid media behind it? How do you target people that want to hear your message and multiply the share potential and drive it out to have the maximum amount of impact with your message? So really, you have to bring those two. It's the art and the science.
What do you think is the best way to utilize paid media at this point? Like, when is it, because there's always every opportunity to promote this post or promote this video or like advertise this, YouTube video, or what do you think the best way to do it is? 2 ways.
The first way is the testing process I just laid out. You need to start doing this, because if you're not doing this in real time, you're leaving a lot of attention on the table, in my opinion. It's very easy to do. You have to learn it. There's a bunch of places online you can learn how to do it. We know how to do it as well as anyone, but a lot of people do. It's not rocket science. So learn how to test, because that will change your trajectory, and you'll get there so much. What a year's worth of learnings can be compacted into 4 weeks, right? So I think that's really important. And then the second piece is, when we find that we have a really successful piece of video that connects emotionally, then the paid becomes an accelerant. I think people think about paid as like binary, like, oh, the stuff that's not viral or organic, you got to put paid behind that. It's actually the worst stuff to put paid behind. Nobody gives a shit about it.
Yeah. It's just going to die.
It's just going to die. And you can force people to watch it. But if I force you to watch it, now what happens?
Yeah.
But if I have a piece of content that people are connecting to and it has an organic tail, right? That's great. How do I expand that tail as wide as possible? Right. So some of our biggest videos, like we have videos that have done 100 million views organically, but then we'll put a ton of paid behind it after it starts taking off, because every time we put $1 behind it, we get a $4 return because people are responding to it. And what happens in this world, people think from such an advertising mindset, which is, if I can project it out, people will buy. And the truth is the exact opposite. It's never a push strategy. It's always a pull strategy. If you can get people interested in the message, if they vest in the content, now they're in discovery mode. Now, instead of being like, whoa, you're pitching me an ad, they're like, whoa, what is that? And now they lean forward, right? And now they're checking out your website. They're checking out your product. Now they're interested about you.
Yeah.
Right. And when they're interested about you, now they're super open to having a business relationship. So I look at the stuff that actually works, and even the stuff that's worked for you in the past. Like your most successful videos may be your best ads, right? Because people connect to them, they're up. The other thing that happens is when these things go have organic share rate, they go up in the algorithm. So what most people don't realize, 30 years ago, an ad cost whatever an ad cost, right? If you went on NBC and it cost $200,000, in the 90s on Friends, I don't care who you were, that's what it cost. On Facebook, if you get really good engagement out of the gates, you get kicked up the algorithm, your ad becomes infinitely more affordable, right?
It's actually the same on, Google, and the same
100%.
on
It's all
YouTube. It's all they're rewarding the content that's actually doing well, even if it's an ad.
It's an auction-based system. So the best content wins. As a selfish platform, they're saying, wow, this ad is really hard for me to get people to watch. I have to charge a lot of money for it. Wow, this thing with Ronaldo is awesome. Everybody wants to watch it. That's really easy for me to go bring another 10 million to it. So I'm going to charge them a lot less.
Yeah.
And that arbitrage value is where brands can be built right now.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. What's the timing that you think people should start? Like, let's say, allow something to have its organic kind of lift, check it, make sure that it's actually working. Like, when do you apply the paid accelerator?
I think it depends on where you're at in your journey. But I think, the earlier the better when you see organic traction. The first 3 to 4 days we call the ignition period, right? And if it doesn't, if a piece of content doesn't take off in the first 2 to 3 days, it's very unlikely it's going to take off after. It's just the way, once the algorithm pins it as something that's not shareable, you're kind of stuck, right? And sometimes that can happen in the first hour. Frankly, that's why that first piece of the video is so important. So you have to be monitoring that. So we always we launch content, we test. So when we launch, we know what the engagement rate is going to be. So we start very, very early in the process because we already know the results.
Right.
So the earlier, the better. If you have less resources, look at the ones, take more of a 30,000 foot view of it, say, okay, which ones have been really effective? Now let me test some advertising against those in the past. And then when you're launching new content and you see something in the first 24 hours that's resonating in a different way, think about putting some paid out or trying to reach a new audience with that. One of the great things about paid that can't do with organic is you can target specific audience types. Right. So if you're looking to grow your brand, you're really crushing this type of demographic, but you want to squeeze over here.
And women.
Right. Yeah. And they may not naturally find your content because it's being shared amongst guys 18 to 34. But you know that if a 25-year-old female in the right circumstances saw it, she would really resonate with it too. That's where paid can open that whole world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, all this advice, again, some people may think, all right, well, this is just for the big brands and this is just for the big content people. But so many of these principles, like if you can just get any message out, like it's so valuable. Yeah. Like imagine, like we give a speech, people get all nervous about giving speeches, and I'll give a speech to 200 people and, it's public speaking and it's a speech and it's 200 people. Well, I'm telling you, if you're speaking in front of 200 people, it feels like a lot. But if you post a video or an Instagram thing and 500 people reach, you're like, fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, what is this? What is this crap? Or if you have a podcast that, like 700 people listen to, you're like, I fucking suck because Joe Rogan's got 300 million. But if you really had 700 people who were all listening to this and you're watching their reaction of your face, your mind would go like, oh, shit, this is important.
Amen,
you know,
man.
so like really like get the perspective right. Like imagine it. And I've had to have people do this to me. Like I got bummed out because my podcast was, 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
It was kind of stuck at this like 30,000 downloads an episode spot for a little while. And I was like, it's just getting 30,000 downloads an episode. And my homie goes to me, he's like, that's the capacity for most NBA stadiums.
It's a stadium. You're in a stadium every week.
It's a stadium every week. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, yeah, it's a fucking stadium. Like, stop fucking holding your head down. This is incredible. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then from there, made the commitment to be consistent and launch that every single week.
Yes. And then you saw that steady growth, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And I love that you touch on this piece because everybody always thinks about these big budgets and these hundreds of millions of views and all the questions are about that. What if you want to be the most popular kid at your high school?
Mm-hmm.
If you apply these principles, you're going to be better off than the other 1,000 kids that are trying to be on Instagram, right? Because they're not thinking that way. They're thinking about themselves and they're trying to project themselves in the world. And if you can be shareable, if you can find that unique voice where what do those 1,000 people want to see on Instagram, right? What do my classmates want to see? Not what am I? What do my classmates want? And how could I give it to them in an interesting way? You'll be surprised how popular you get.
Yeah, and also remember how important this might be, especially if you're sharing something that's vulnerable.
Yes.
I remember having a talk with Jason Ellis, who's now really open and vocal about his bisexuality.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, mate, like if I come out with this really hard, I'm just going to get so much backlash from people. And I was like, yeah, for sure. But you're going to get some of those people who now have the courage to express the truth of what they're feeling. He's like, yeah, I know. And he ended up going for it and doing it. And which takes immense courage. But now when I talk to him, it's like, yeah, he does get that backlash and those people who are going to come and attack him for his sexual proclivities and whatever.
Yeah.
But he's also going to get like those 1 out of every 10 messages of some kid being like, I didn't know how I was going to go on with my life, because of these feelings and the truth about how I was feeling sexually. And I was too scared to express it. And now that you voiced it, like, I have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
So like being able to share a message like that, all right, maybe like it won't be publicly applauded from everybody, but maybe it'll just reach a couple people that'll make a difference.
So awesome.
And that fucking matters.
Matters a lot, man.
That matters a lot.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a decision there too. A lot of people think about going wide. There's a lot of value in going deep.
Yeah.
Right. And I always like to say niche is rich in this new world. Niche is rich. Everybody always used to think about these blockbuster movies or Hollywood or like 300 million people. It doesn't take that many people to be really passionate about you for you to have a lot of power in the digital world and a lot of influence and can do a lot of good. Right. In some ways, you'd rather have 100,000 people that are ride or die than to have 10 million that are like, oh, yeah, I know him. He's cool.
Yeah. And that's something for a lot of the females who have a message they want to put out. It can get discouraged, and men too, but I particularly notice this phenomenon where like if it's a pretty girl and the pretty girl, it can be disappointing to them knowing that if they show their butt in a bikini, they fucking crush on their post. They get like 3 to 4x. And then if they tell some like heartfelt sentiment of what they really want to talk about, it doesn't do that good, or they won't get followers or whatever. And it's like, I always remind them, like, remember, like you're here to be seen, not looked at. Like if you want to be looked at, that's fine. Then pander to the people who just want to look, but that audience isn't going to listen to you because that's not what they're conditioned for. So like over time, the more people that see you, like who cares if your numbers drop? Who cares if you lose all of those people that are like, I'm not following her anymore. She's not showing her butt every day. You know what I mean? Like recognize like the quality of the audience really is what matters the most. It's not just the raw numbers necessarily. It can be like, all right, well, these are people who are listening and like reading and responding to the comments. Like that's important.
That's so smart, man. Like that's such wisdom. Because I mean, think about it another way. Do you want to be the 35,007th Kardashian? Right? Is that your brand? Like, is that what you want to be? Is that going to be valuable? Right?
I don't know. How many spots does it pay out for your Kardashian?
I don't know,
this
man.
Is like the World Series of Poker. It pays out a lot of spots.
It gets a little thin at the end there, Aubrey. It gets a little thin at the end.
35,007 might not be in the money.
But do you want to be the number 5 that really is vulnerable and like build a value-based brand, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really pays out, right? And by the way, if it's not authentic to you, it's never going to last for the long term anyway, right? If it makes you uncomfortable, it's not who you are. I mean, you know better than anyone, right? It's just like you have to have connection between head and heart on this stuff, or it just won't work.
Yeah.
It's never going to work.
I have one more tactical question here. Maybe I have more, but this one comes to mind. So let's say you have an old piece of content.
Yeah.
Old piece of content, you posted on Instagram, you posted it on YouTube, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better to repost and refresh? Let's say it did pretty well, but you didn't do too much with it, or you didn't tag it, test it, whatever.
Yeah.
Is it better to pull and repost, or is it better to try and revive something that already has some engagement? I don't know exactly how the algorithms work.
Yeah, I think once you're in the algorithm for a long period of time, I think it's really
your piece of content has been dead for a couple years, maybe.
You can't resuscitate dead content in most cases. If it
so
did,
you got to repost.
You got to repost, and that brings up an interesting area where I don't think people think about. Think about all the time and energy you put into your content over the last 5 years, right? And all the content that maybe wasn't aligned perfectly with the timing. Right? Because the timing matters so much, or the news cycle that week, or where your fans were doing that week, it might have been different. How do you think about your existing content as like a library that could be completely repurposed? And how much do you have on the cutting room floor that if put in the right direction might be super valuable, right? Or maybe you had an unbelievable video and you were bummed out because it only did a third of what you thought it was going to do. What if with a new first 6 seconds, now it really connected and took off?
Yeah.
Right. So like that's an asset for you. People always want to go create the next thing and they don't think about the things that they have. Your most valuable asset, if you've been creating content for a while, is the stuff that you already have in the bank that you could recut, you could cut things together, you could do social narratives with them. There's all kinds of different new techniques where you can bring these things together that can be really, really valuable and much more cost effective and efficient than trying to go think of the next big idea.
Yeah, I think it's cool to think about it that way. And also people have this idea, like, even for me, if it's a piece of content that I put out 4 years ago, to me, it's like, well, everybody's seen that. No, they haven't. I have like 100,000 new followers. First of all, who weren't even following me then, at least. And then there was only a portion of the people who follow me who even saw it at that point. And then that portion of people probably forgot that shit. Like they probably don't even remember
1,000%. I mean, okay, so think about a video you watched 4 years ago about some person that you don't know.
I don't even know.
You don't even know, right? You could see it all again and think you never saw it before. It's vaguely familiar, right? And so,
I mean, I remember a double rainbow, kind of. Like it was almost a triple rainbow.
It's a couple that stick. That's awesome. But there's a lot of value in and part of that's ego too, right? Like that was me then. Right. And now I'm different. But I think there's a lot of value in that kind of back catalog.
Yeah. Well, shit, man. This has been truly one of like the most helpful podcasts I think I've ever been a part of, as far as like tactical knowledge and how to share a message. Because I think that's one of the most important things we can do is just, as you alluded to, like share our humanness, which forms that connection, which allows people to realize, hey, we're all same, just living different lives.
Amen. And I just, I want to encourage people to lean into the unity message that you're talking about. I think a big part of your base are really people that are conscious about the world and their body and their place in the world. And I think those are the people we need now to step up and think about positivity and unity. I think that's such a huge part of our kind of next journey as a country and as a world. And so people that have that gift, I encourage them to really step into it and own it, because we need it right now.
That's beautiful, man. All right, break through the noise, the 9 rules to capture global attention. Tim Staples and your boy Josh Young. I'm imagining he's your boy Josh Young. I don't know who Josh Young is.
5 times New York Times selling author.
Oh, hell yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm going to definitely dive into this, and I'm probably going to listen to this podcast again too, because it was so valuable.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Aubrey.
And where else can people find you, man?
Yeah, so you can find the book at timstaplesbook.com. We're at all the major booksellers and Amazon. And then shareability.com is the company, and I'm on Twitter at Mikadala.
Beautiful. How do you spell that?
Micodala.
Dope.
It's all the cities I've lived in.
Oh, I like that. Nice, man. Well, thanks so much for stopping by, brother. That was a real pleasure.
Really
thanks,
fun.
everybody. Peace.